Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video we have 3 goals. We're going to begin our final project, our Yelp clone. Again, my example is going to be Yelp Comic, I think I'll call it, or Yelp Comics. We're going to add a landing page and an index page that's going to list all of our items or all of our comics, and we want each item to have a title, a description, and an image. So basically we've got to set up a new application and then get those few things done. Before we get started, I just want to reiterate that you should pick a category that interests you. Don't just pick something, don't just do comics because that's what I'm doing. Do something else, do something that you like, because it'll be a lot more fun, a lot more engaging to you. Plus, it's something that you can put on your resume and you can show later that, hey, here's a little bit of who I am, because interviewers actually want to see who you are as a person. So by sharing a site with them that goes over something you're interested in, it'll be a lot better of a project on your portfolio. I also just want to reiterate that this is our final project, and we're going to be building this and improving it over the rest of the entire course. So I'm in my week 10 folder. Let's go ahead and make directory. I'll call it Yelp Comics. CD into that. And then we're going to npm in it. Yes, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. App.js. Yes, that's fine. So now we have our package.json. There it is. So let's go ahead and make our app.js. So touch app.js and then open it up. We also need to install our packages. We need to install npm express, and we need EJS. Those are kind of our bare bones things. While that's going, we can go ahead and start on our app.js. We need our imports, const express, will require express. And there's another way you could do this that some people like. I don't personally, but some people like to do this. You put a comma, and then app equals express. And as long as you put a comma, you don't have to put const over and over again. I personally don't like that. I think that it makes your code look a little strange. But some people do, and it's nice that it kind of lines up your variables. It's nice that Gorm takes that into account and lines up your variables for you. But again, I personally don't like that. It's a personal choice. You do it if you want. I don't care one way or the other. It looks like we have a new version of npm, so let's go ahead and update that. It's just a patch version, so it's not going to break anything. npm i-g npm. I'll be back when that finishes. Alright, that is done. So now we need the rest of our boilerplate. We're going to set our view engine. We're also going to tell our app to listen. So app.set view engine JS. Also down here a little bit, app.listen. And again, I'm listening on port 3000. You could be listening on another port depending on whatever you set in your project settings. Alright, now let's run it and make sure we don't get any errors for typos or whatever. No daemon, app.js. There, it's running, so we know it at least works, even though we're not serving any routes yet. Which is the next thing on our list. Let's go ahead and get a root route, app.get. And this is actually going to be our landing page. For now, I just wanted to say welcome to the landing page. Here's a link to get to the index page. So setting this up, I'm going to res.render. We'll call it landing. And I have not created this yet, so let's go ahead and make that. Touch. Actually, I need to make my views directory. Make directory views, and remember this is something that Express expects to see. That's one of the few things that you have to actually name it the way that it's supposed to be named, that it expects to be named. And then inside of views, I'm going to make landing.ejs. Let's go ahead and open that up. And all we're going to do is just h1 landing page. We're not even going to put any HTML or anything like that yet, because we don't really care. We're going to no daemon app.js. Now let's get our running URL. Open it like that. Connection failed. Connection refused, rather. So that's not working. Let's figure out why. Oops. Yep, that's why. It's in my here request response. Let's save. We'll restart our server. Running. Refresh, see what works. Yep, there we go, landing page. So we got the landing page. We're actually going to make the landing page and make it pretty in a much later video because I don't really care about it right now. We'll get into that much later on. I want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of databases and things like that first. All right, so the next thing, and this is where yours will start to kind of diverge from mine a little bit, even if only slightly. We want to app.get/comics. Now, this is a convention of RESTful routing. I've mentioned RESTful routing before. We haven't really gone in depth yet. We will, I promise, I swear. But basically what you need to do is it needs to be / whatever your item is, pluralized. So it might be bicycles, or it might be games, or it might be videos, or movies, or classes, or whatever. Just call it the name of the thing pluralized. And then request response, as always. And we're just going to res.render comics. And again, you would use whatever yours is called. And I have not created this comics yet, so we're going to shut down our server and create it. Touch view/comics.vjs. And now we have comics. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of boilerplate. Head, body, and then do an H1. Looks like a type on a different keyboard today than normal, so it's weird. Comics page. Now let's test it. Let's see if we can go to /comics. There we go, comic page. So that route is working. Our next step, and this is a step that we won't have to take again once we add a database, but we're going to create a global variable for our data. It's going to simulate our database. Const, we'll call it comics, equals an array of comics. And inside of here, each comic's going to have an object, and there's going to be 3 properties on that. Title, description, which is also going to be a string, and image, which is going to be a string, but it's a URL. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this 3 times so that I have 3 comics to play with. For the title, we'll do Watchmen, one of my favorites. And I want to get a nice big long description because when we start working with it, we're going to want to have like a paragraph. So we're going to do some lorem ipsum. If you're not familiar with lorem ipsum, it's basically just filler text. There's a few lorem ipsum generators, but I like hipster ipsum or bacon ipsum. Those are 2 of my favorites. Hipster uses a lot of hipster lingo, if you will. Here we go. I'm baby Edison bulb flannel air plant actually vexillologist crucifix plaid meh. So very, very hipster-esque. I'm just going to paste that in there. It's just a placeholder. I'm going to do that with all of the descriptions. All descriptions are set. And now for my images, I went ahead and found some images. It took me a while to find some open source versions because these are all copyrighted works. So I had to search pretty hard to find some open source. Fortunately, Wikipedia and Wikimedia rather. So the first one is Watchmen. The second one is a thing called Batman. I know there's a ton of Batmans out there, but the last one is Why the Last Man. If you are at all into comic books and you have not read Why the Last Man, get off your butt. It's fantastic. So we're saving that. Make sure we don't have any errors. No, we don't. We're good. So now we've got our data. We're not doing anything with our data, but we have our data. Yours will likely be different. You may or may not have a title description. You should have an image. Everything, you should have an image. You need an image. Have an image, basically. But title description might be different. For my recipes, I had ingredients. I had all kinds of different things. Cooked time, things like that. So yours may be different. Don't try and get all of them. Just add a few right now, because we're going to add more later. We're going to add author, we're going to add publisher, year published, all kinds of stuff. But for now, we're just kind of getting a very basic array of data to play with so that we can start to set our website up and make it look like we want it to. And again, this is a global array because we have to access it from multiple routes. We can't build it inside any one route or else it will be scoped locally. So in this comics route, let's update this so that it actually passes the data through. I'm calling the data comics. So we're going to pass in an object, comics. And remember, we could do it like this. Comics where the key equals the value of comics, but ES6 shorthand allows us to do it like that. We're passing in comics. Let's save, make sure it runs like it's supposed to. Does this let us go to comics still? Sure does. Now that we're passing the data in, we have to actually use the data. So inside of comics.ejs, which is right here, we're going to put, I don't know, let's just put a div, with a class of, I don't know, container. And then inside of there, we're going to have a bunch of different little cards, little kind of subdividers for our data. So each comic is going to get a little card. So is kind of the term I'm going to call it. So div class equals card. And inside each one, we're going to have an image. Class is going to be card image. The source, we'll get to that in a second, that's going to come from the data. And the alt text, for now, we're just going to say picture of the comic. That is not good enough. That is not a sufficient alt text, but that's all we can do right now until we actually get our database and everything set up. So after that, we're going to have an H3 that basically just says the title, but we want that to have a class of card title. And let's get rid of this extra space that Gorm puts in there. Then we're going to have a p tag, where class equals, this is the description, so we'll call it card description. Get rid of all that extra space. And there's going to be the description. Let's put the title. Let's just see what that looks like. So let's refresh. It will be something like this. Obviously, it's not perfect, because that's going to be an image, and the title and description is ugly as anything, but that's what we want. So we want that one for each of our pieces of data. Right now we have 3 comics, so we want 3 of those. So inside the container, we're going to start using our EJS. So we're going to use our scriptlet tags to basically do a for each loop. So we're passing it in as comics, I believe. Let's double check. Putting it in, yes, as comics. So comics dot for each. So we're doing our arrow function, because remember, a for each takes a function and it will run that function on each item. So for each comic, do this. I'm just going to cut and paste that in there, fix the indentation, and our titles, or rather our data, our keys, our title, description, and image. So for comics, for our image, we want the source to be % equals, because we actually want to insert this into our HTML. % equals comic dot image, and close our tag. The title we want to be % equals comic dot title. The description we want to be comic dot description. So we've got our for each loop, and it's doing a running function. And that function will return this, and we'll populate it with that each time. So let's save and refresh. There we go. Picture of the comic. So the Watchmen one did not work, but Batman and Y the Last Man did. So the picture of the comic, let's see why that's not working. There we go. So now we're getting 3 different things. We're getting all of our data dumped in there, even though we've only put this for each loop in there once. Now this is still ugly as sin, but it's a step in the right direction. Functionally, we got it working. In this video, we created a new application and added in our boilerplate that's inside of the app.js. All this importing of constants and express and setting the view engine and setting up a couple routes, telling it to listen. We created a landing page that all it does is just serve a static landing page, which is just that right now. We created an index route, is the terminology for that, but index is just the / whatever the item is. Mine is comics, yours might be cars or whatever. We then create an EJS file for that takes in data and displays it to the users. Mine is called comics.ejs, and it takes this data, which is being passed in by this route right here. Remember, this is an object. Passed in, and then we access that using the same variable name that we passed it in as. Then we did the for each loop, that for each comic rendered a div with image and h3 and a p tag inside of it. Right now, we've just got static data that's hard-coded into our actual application right here. But once we get a database going, we're going to house our data off-site, and it'll be persistent, and it'll allow us to have the data persist even when we stop the server. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be happy to help. Thanks.